Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about why people who take extreme diet approaches really need to stop demonizing both carbs and fat, because they're both necessary for really ideal health and ideal athleticism and fitness. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. And when we talk about these things, no one's talking about excess, right? It's excess of anything that causes everything from health problems to obesity and everything else. And of course, obesity is a health problem, right? Obesity by itself will eventually contribute to things like diabetes, heart disease, all of that. There is no such thing as health at any size. It doesn't exist. That's a myth. But the point we get to with the excess is that people need to remember excess is oftentimes also defined by your energy turnover, and no one is saying excessive amounts of saturated fat won't harm you, because there's good evidence that it will. Now, you're going to have the keto people are going to run up and scream about that and be like, oh, that's not true, that's not true. Yeah, it actually is, and even y'all's blood work on your keto forums and everything actually shows that you guys are at all sorts of risk most of the time once you're out of a caloric deficit. In other words, ketogenic diets, okay, so let's state this clearly. The risk of ketogenic diets, which actually is there, isn't present while you're in a caloric deficit. So let that sink in. So all the people who, the vegans and other people who hate on that, let's be honest here. People who follow even those sort of diets that get 30% of their calories every day or 40% from saturated fat do not have health problems as a result of it while they're in a caloric deficit. In other words, what we're looking for is the health markers in their blood work doesn't exist until they go to maintenance calories. And when they've been sitting at maintenance calories for a little while, then we see things like the LDL going up, right? That's what we're looking at. But they have to be at maintenance or a surplus for that to happen. It doesn't actually happen while they're in a deficit. So, we need to have perspective there. Same thing with stuff like fructose. Fructose, unless you have medical issues, and I know someone who has medical issues directly related to fructose due to some serious gut issues, doesn't really hurt you in trace amounts. It's not a problem. There's fructose in most healthy foods. There's some in there. Not a lot. I'm not saying there aren't a few people who have medical issues who can't tolerate even small amounts sometimes, but what we're looking at in fructose, what we think of as these refined sugars, is a problem if you consume large amounts of it chronically. You consume large amounts of it chronically, but what happens when you're in a caloric deficit? These problems don't really manifest, do they? The elevated triglycerides, the issues that are related to your liver and everything. So energy turnover matters. Now, it's one of those that if you were to consume it long term in large amounts, yeah, it can be problematic over time. But it's still an issue of energy in, energy out. Now, the reason this doesn't get pointed out a lot is because, honestly, most people out there are not athletic. They don't train hard. They don't have enormous energy turnovers. In other words, we're talking about people out there who maybe their maintenance calories is 2,500 because they're not particularly athletic. They're not extremely active. They don't have significant amounts of muscle mass. All right, that's a fair point for the general population, because these things, even in relatively small amounts, can start pushing you up into a caloric surplus. But that's the problem we have. It's a sedentary lifestyle, usually combined with too much fructose, too much saturated fat. It's this whole combination that's the problem. It's not any one thing causing the issues, and it's certainly not just carbs or fat that are causing the issues, because let's come over to the point of overall health. We really need both. You really need both, and ideally you want lots of starchy carbs. If you want to be athletic and strong, significant amounts of starch-based carbs, glucose-based carbs, are really great for health. They're great for athleticism. They're great for athletic performance. Most of your top athletes in the world, the most elite athletes, are on starch-based diets. You look at most of the cultures around the world, the people with the best longevity, people with the greatest longevity follow starch-based diets. They get the majority of their calories specifically from starch, glucose-based complex carbohydrates. That's really kind of your ideal fuel source. But by that same token, are we going to talk about health and athleticism? All right, dietary fat becomes more important for people who are athletic and people who train. People who aren't particularly athletic, they don't actually need that much dietary fat. We go back to those long-lived cultures. A lot of them don't really follow particularly high-fat diets. They're low-fat diets, very low-fat diets, or very moderately low-fat diets. Because even things like the Mediterranean diet, they're getting most of their fats from monounsaturated sources. And people say, oh, well, they add all this fat, but it's not that much. It's not that much. I mean, even me, guys, like people are like, oh my God, you're eating all these eggs every day. Yeah, I eat 6 to 12 whole eggs every day. I'm still on a very low-fat diet. All right, so that's because I don't have any other significant sources of fat unless I eat peanut butter that day, in which case I don't eat the eggs. So for someone like me, I'm still on a low-fat diet. That's only 60 grams of fat in a dozen eggs. Most of my other food right now is fat-free dairy, extremely lean cuts of meat, potatoes, rice, beans, vegetables. There's almost no fat in any of that other stuff. Oats, when I eat oats, yeah, there's some in there. But the point is, that's my only real source of fat. And you need that. You do need those fat-soluble vitamins, and that will affect your recovery. We've got data out there showing that in athletic populations that when your dietary fat goes too low, injury rates go up. Why? Most likely has to do with fat-soluble vitamins and connective tissue recovery, right? Vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin D, all these things, these are fat-soluble vitamins. These are fat-soluble vitamins. And honestly, people, I think they make a bigger deal about essential fatty acids more than they need to, but if you're eating a varied diet, you're probably not deficient. You probably aren't if you're eating green vegetables and eggs and whatever else. You're not deficient. But we do come over to the point of fat-soluble vitamins. We do need these things for recovery, and particularly the more athletic you are, you do benefit from a higher fat intake. Well, if we come over to the health, we come over to energy turnover, we come over to body fat maintenance. Being athletic and training hard is massively beneficial, and it's massively beneficial for reducing cancer rates, cardiovascular disease, all these things, right? Well, if your dietary fat goes too low and you're particularly athletic, your injury rates go up. So the more athletic you become, generally you do need a little bit more fat in your diet. And I would say for most of you healthy men out there, 50 grams a day is probably your minimum. That's baseline. Now, a lot of people would say, well, that's low. Well, it is low, but again, if you're eating a lot of starchy stuff and lean proteins, you'd be surprised how low your dietary fat goes. You actually will find that you need to add some stuff back in, sometimes to even hit 50 or 60 grams a day. Like for me, if I didn't add the eggs back in, there are days where I would be on over 3,000 calories and probably only have 10 grams of fat, 15 grams of fat, right? And that's unacceptable. That's unacceptably low for someone who trains hard and they're athletic. So the point we get to with all of this is that people want to demonize these things instead of saying, wait a minute, these are just fuel sources. This is just nutrition. And most of your health problems are caused by imbalance. They're caused by excess. They're caused by being sedentary, excessive amounts of refined foods. It's not these single ingredient foods when you're consuming an appropriate amount of them that's causing the problems. Carbs are not making you fat. Even eating significant amounts of dietary fat is probably not making you fat. What's usually causing people to get fat and have all these health problems is too many carbs, too much fat, not enough training and exercise, being sedentary. That's the cause. That's what's causing these issues. Hyperpalatable, calorically dense foods combined with sedentary lifestyles. That's what's causing the health problems. That's what's causing people to be obese. And everyone wants to run around and demonize the one thing. It's a lot of people, it's fat's causing the problem. The worst vegans, any saturated fat is bad. It's so full of shit. You have people on the other end, it's carbs, it's starches. It's all of this causing problems when they really mean it's table sugar combined with a bunch of fats. And oftentimes it's processed carbs combined with processed fats, all stuck together into a delicious tasting food, and people overeating this who don't train. Right? That's your problem. It's the whole combination of these things. It's not any one single one of these things. And people really have to stop thinking of these individual foods, which actually have health benefits, and you need certain amounts of these things really for ideal health and athleticism. And I'm going to assume if you're watching my channel, you are concerned with athleticism and fitness. These things need to stop being demonized. They're really not the problem the way that people want to describe them as. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.